Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start this afternoon's session with not looking at location independence or remote work as this kind of anybody everywhere, and that location doesn't matter, because at some level location does matter. Since we're in Southeast Asia, we're going to talk to people that have been doing business and running teams in this region, just to kind of highlight some of the differences. And if anybody's been thinking maybe about doing that or about expanding into this region, this will be a really good opportunity to ask some people questions that you might have. So I'm going to ask each person to introduce themselves so that I don't screw it up and mix up profiles and stuff like that. So why don't we start at the far end with Justin?
So Justin Cooke, co-founder of Empire Flippers, my business partner Joe Magnotti. We help people buy and sell online businesses. We have a marketplace for doing that. I'm interested in this. We have a team of just under 40 people, and our entire team is distributed. In fact, our entire team is nomadic, so they're regularly traveling all over Southeast Asia. And I've got some insights into setting up a company in the Philippines, which we've done previously, and some of the ramifications that come with working and living abroad.
Hi, my name is Andrea Loubier. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Mailbird, which is a badass email client for those of you on PC. And I think some of the things that will be interesting to kind of share, especially having started a company from Southeast Asia, are definitely some of the trials and tribulations of doing that, a lot of hard learnings as well, and how to kind of manage a company that you set up in the US from Asia. Yeah. And also a little bit probably about fundraising, some of the things that I've experienced with that. So, yeah.
My name's Stuart Jones. I'm founder of Coworkation. Coworkation does co-working retreats to inspirational locations around the world. We do Bali, Spain, Tuscany. We're doing Thailand as well. And I'm also organising a festival in the Spanish Pyrenees in August, conference/festival, which looks at the location independent movement. Basically looking at how the ecosystem of work and life and how that is evolving and changing is coming together and really trying to join the dots, everything from remote work through to digital nomadism, through to location independence, through to lifestyle design, looking at all those topics. And so remote work is obviously a very important element of that.
Great. Okay, so these are our panelists. How today's session is going to work is I have exactly 3 questions that I'm going to ask, one for each of them, and then I have nothing else. So we're going to sit here. It's going to be really quiet and awkward for everyone involved, unless there's some awesome questions on Slido. So please hop on. I asked everyone to introduce themselves so you have a bit of a context in terms of who they are, what they do, and where the questioning might go with today. And I'll kick it off, but please hop on Slido and then don't leave us all hanging up here for like 40 minutes with no questions. Stuart, you want to kick us off, and I'm going to go really wide with this and just say, since this is the question of the panel, does location matter?
Look, I think location can be, in the context of remote work, can be looked at in a couple of different areas, and very different areas. First one being that my background is, I guess, different in a lot of the business owners in here, in that the businesses I set up in Barcelona required a physical presence. They weren't online, they weren't IT or web-based businesses. They were doing tours in Barcelona. There was a co-working space, there was a bar. So different businesses there whereby you needed to be there, or people needed to be there to run the businesses. But being I'm maybe a little bit selfish, I thought, well, hang on, I don't want to be in Barcelona all year round. I want to have enough freedom to be able to travel, go back home, to be able to work from different places within Barcelona and outside of Barcelona. So I structured the businesses in a way whereby I had that freedom and I was able to work remotely. What I had to do as a result of that, a lot of the guys working in the company were sort of looking at me and going back to Australia or on a beach in Thailand or whatever doing work and saying, hang on, he's over there all year, and then we're slaving away in Barcelona. So I needed to look at how we could structure that to really give them more workplace flexibility there. So I think that's sort of an interesting area of where this movement is that physical businesses which require a physical presence in a certain location, how can they be structured? But then also, even if you've got a remote team, people are doing retreats, and they're organising the company retreats. But I think as we move forward, there'll be some interesting hybrid models that really start to spring up of how can we structure this. So, okay, maybe we don't actually need an office, but there's some real advantages by the actual interaction that you get from working in the same physical location. So, right, how do people do that at the moment? They go away and they have their annual retreat, but maybe there's other ways you can do it. Maybe you can set up set up a base in Bali for 6 months, make a deal with a co-working space, or rent out an area depending on how many employees you have, and say, look, you can come and go from here. If you want to come for a week, whether you want to come for 3 months or whether you want to be for the 6 months, then you're more than welcome. Or maybe we'll have 3 bases or 4 bases around the world, and you can work remotely. So your location independent, pick and choose where you want to work from, and you can work from home. That doesn't matter, but there's more flexibility for you to be able to do it, and there's more options in order to be able to work from different places around the world.
Ask you to talk about money. So you're running a company you're based in Indonesia. The company is kind of very well known, actually, and known to be based in Indonesia. I don't know if it's a perception thing that kind of VCs and stuff might have. Has it impacted your ability to raise money, or maybe share a little journey about trying to find some cash?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the first time I ever even pursued trying to fundraise was at attending a tech conference in Singapore. And, I was going around. I didn't really know how to do it. I was like, let me talk about my company. You're pitching. You're like, hey, did I nail my one-line pitch? And it was interesting because one thing that I found when pitching to investors, especially in Southeast Asia, it was very different compared to kind of the feedback and response that I would get from pitching to investors in Europe and pitching to investors in the US. Now, Mailbird is a US company. We did register the company and incorporated it in the US. And so the majority of our customer base is in the US, so that was our intention to fundraise in America. So my first experience, fundraising to investors in Southeast Asia was very nitty gritty. They really wanted give us the facts, give us the numbers. It was all about that. They didn't care about the team really. They didn't care about what your big vision is. They were just give me the hard numbers. Okay, got to put together all these metrics. Shit. So that was my first experience with it. And then the more I started doing it, you learn a little bit some of the pushback that you have. In Southeast Asia, I would say investors are obviously more keen in certain Asian markets. Indonesia has been a very interesting market for VCs in that it's this huge growing, large population. Tech is growing really, really rapidly here. So Indonesia was very interesting for a lot of investors, and it got a lot of attention. Now, when I started talking to investors in the U.S., they're like, "Wait, where are you?" And you kind of grit your teeth a little bit when you're like, "Oh, I'm in Bali," and they're like, "Wait, what?" No. So the thing that I experienced with VCs in the U.S. is they really wanted you to be literally in their neighborhood. They wanted to be able to come over and knock on your door to be like, "Hey, what's up? How's it going?" And in my head, I was like, I don't understand this. We live, it's in this day and age where technology allows us for you to literally knock on my door at any moment in my life. You can call me at any moment in time. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And so I did get a little bit of pushback when fundraising and also having a distributed team. So not only just being in Indonesia, but having a distributed team. They're like, no, we want the core team to be together in one location, in one office. And so I was like, okay, why, So the company was founded by myself and 2 other guys, one of which is our CTO who's based in Copenhagen, and the other one is based in Switzerland. And so you have these 3 co-founders of a company that are not sitting in the same office, and yet we are doing, an amazing thing, building this great email software company, but investors didn't see it that way. They were just like, why aren't you guys together? How are you going to stay productive? So a lot of the objections that you've seen in some of the presentations here, I think, is also some of the things that I experienced when trying to fundraise. So, yeah.
I wanted to introduce for you, Justin, is around some of the, how do we say this? I've been asked this question by a number of people myself over the last day and a half. Operating in some countries requires you to spend a lot of your time in the gray, So it's a little hard from a regulation point of view, legal point of view, to always know whether or not exactly what you're supposed to be doing, how you're doing it right, whatnot. So how do you operate in an environment of such uncertainty, legally speaking?
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit before we got on, and I was like, do you want the real answer on this? And you're like, yeah.
I said, no, bullshit them, bullshit them.
So, I mean, honestly, we have a U.S. LLC, and all of our people that come out are on tourist visas. And they're traveling around on tourist visas, and they don't stay anywhere very long. So because they're location independent, they're traveling around through different countries on tourist visas. We don't have them in any particular place, so they're visiting those places on their own. I'll go back really quick, and you know, most of our, the majority of our team is now either American or British, but we do have a team in the Philippines. And when we started off, as I was speaking yesterday, we set up a Philippines corporation. The reason we did that is because we had a staff of people in the Philippines, and we wanted to do it legitimately. We wanted an office. We wanted to, you know, them to be able to pay their effectively their Social Security, and we wanted to be a legitimate company. And we set up this proper S corp in the Philippines. The problem is that doing it the legitimate way was opening us up to bribes, lawsuits, lots of problems in the Philippines. And I'll tell you, if I had to do it again, I was setting up in the Philippines, I absolutely wouldn't do it legitimately. I would use TransferWise, and I would pay my people, and I wouldn't even bother setting up a legitimate company overseas. It was not even close to being worth the hassle. That was our true experience. So
why don't you tell us how you really feel?
I actually did the same in Spain when I was setting up, and I think particularly when you're in the early phases of a startup, you're in a new country, or even if you're in your own country, but probably more so when you're in another country. You're trying to get your head around legalities, the bureaucracy of it all. You're trying to figure it all out, and then if you've got workers from other parts of the world, trying to get them work visas, and go through all that paperwork. Spanish paperwork is just a nightmare. We tried on a couple of occasions, and we gave up. We're like, no, bugger this. Let's just like, you know, they were able to. The good thing about Spain, is you really can fly. It's one place in Europe where you can fly into Barcelona airports. They'll rock up at the airport. You might have spent the past year there, and they'll like see, okay, Australian passport, yeah, that's okay. No worries, stamp on your way through. Whereas you're probably not going to get away with that in Switzerland or the UK. Sometimes you just got to like make the decision and say, look, stuff it. Like, I'm going to, you know, I know it's not done correctly, but at the end of the day, really, I've got enough shit to take care of with my business, rather than going through all this bureaucracy.
I'll add one more thing on the tax side of things. We don't operate in the gray area there at all. So we have a U.S. LLC. We pay U.S. taxes. Any money above and beyond our salaries that comes through, pass through income, we're taxed on. There are much better tax havens to be in. We could set up like a BVI Corp with a Singapore bank account that owns this company and like pay nothing as Americans in taxes. But our thought is that if we ever want to raise money, which we don't need, we're cash flow positive, or we want to eventually sell our business, it'd be a much easier acquisition target if it's a U.S. LLC that pays taxes. By not paying those, that would be an additional consideration a buyer would have to take into account on whether they want to acquire our company. Also, we'd probably get a discount on our valuation based on the fact that we're not paying taxes, and the acquiring company would have to. So.
Okay, we're going to open up the floor to questions. If we can pull up Slido on the screen, hopefully you guys have been populating it. In the meantime, I'll just say, it took us 13 months to form our full company, and that included all the licenses and everything else, but it took 13 months and a lot of money and a lot of time. I just formed a company in the UK 2 weeks ago for something else, and I kind of filled it out on Saturday online, paid £12, and it was done by Monday. Ouch. All right. Okay. You all operate in developing nations. Do each of your companies have CSR giving programs, and how do you give back to the communities, countries or communities that you work in?
We do a couple of things. One, I mean, it's small, but we do a Christmas gift giving thing every year, and then we'll raise money from our audience, and then our company will match it, and we'll get either our team or friends of Empire Flippers together and go hand out or hand out the gifts to kids in poor areas. And we also have a Kiva account, and there's some debate over whether Kiva is actually helpful or not, but we lend there.
Yeah, and similarly, like within our team, some things that we do, depending on where people are, there's different structures, like bonus structures and whatnot that you offer. Particularly in Indonesia, you are required to pay something that's called a THR, which is kind of like an end-of-year bonus. So we do that obviously for all our team members as well. And yeah, we've done a lot of different things in terms of fundraising activities, for different organizations. Like we did one where we raised some money to send to developing countries where they required technology for their educational systems. So we did little things like that here and there. So yeah.
We've struggled with this actually. I guess like the festival, FreedomXFest, which we're putting on in August, we inviting a couple of organisations, Street Child, España, which to give them awareness of what they're doing, because we really believe and are very aligned with their project. Coworkation, I've grappled with this, and I actually don't, to be honest, I just don't have the right answer with this, because Coworkation essentially does short-term retreats. Now, the first ever event we did in Bali, came in here, thought, right, let's work with Bali Children's Project. Had meetings with them, like chatting with them, and we said, okay, well, how can we actually help? And sort of like I had these ideas, oh, we can bring these really talented entrepreneurs down, and like, they can work with, these people, or we can bring them along to the schools or whatever. The answer back was, it's not going to make a difference. You're going to come in here, it might give you a bit of a feel-good factor, it might be good for your branding or whatever. It's really not going to make a difference. And I've had conversations with a couple of friends sort of in the in NGOs or social impact sector, or have a bit more experience in this, to try and get ideas. And it's something, if anyone's got ideas around this, I'd be really open to it, because you sort of think, okay, you're in a location for 1 week on a short-term retreat. Can you really actually, beyond like actually have an affiliation there and say, there's a donation part or whatever, but is there something a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more creative, or more impactful that we can be doing? And honest answer is, at the moment, we haven't found the right formula for that.
Okay. I'm going to chip in for just a second here with this one. The whole idea of CSR and the idea of giving back to the communities that you're working in is, for me, a problematic one. And maybe it's my background. I worked for the UN for 10 years. I saw a lot of kind of like well-intentioned but misguided efforts, let's say, to give back, because there's kind of like an assumed us and them in that. So I know at Whowood we have something called the co-giving program, but the whole premise of it is not how do we give back, but it's like how do we be active participants in the place that we are. And for us, we're a little different. I mean, we are a physical space. We occupy place in a community. But yeah, that idea of giving back versus actually just kind of being one and working with people, I think is one to think about. Okay, so and I've also instructed. We talked about these guys afterwards about not everybody will necessarily answer every question unless it is specifically for everyone. We'll kind of take turns or find out who's the most relevant. So I'm going to go with the next question, which was, what was one mistake you learned from the most as an entrepreneur? Who wants to answer that?
Certainly talk about mistakes. I've made a lot of them. I think the main one for me, what I call the entrepreneur's curse, is that you have ideas, and sometimes you have too many of them. And I've lost focus on that amount of time, sort of over the past 15 years. I get an idea and I act upon it. I woke up one day, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm like, shit, I've got 7 companies, and a couple of them are doing okay, a few of them there, I wasn't able to sort of devote attention to, really any of them like fully. And I'm like, I've got to do something about this. So I started selling out and getting rid of and structuring them so that I had nothing to do with them, or very little to do with them. But I think that's one thing I've really learned. Like you just can't act on every single idea that you have, and focus is essential in any work that you're doing. Deep work and focus is essential. We all know that. But sometimes it can be so tempting. You get a bit excited about a new idea you have, and you want to act upon it.
I guess I can share one big one, I think, for us at Mailbird. So we're trying to tap into the whole market, because we are, in fact, an email software company. So we didn't really focus on any one particular geographic location, despite the fact that the majority of our customers are in the US. However, we learned about this huge, kind of like Black Friday, Cyber Monday thing. I don't know if you guys know about. It's like a big sales day for online sales. We learned about in China. They have something called Singles Day. And we're like, what's this all about? And it's basically where, people go crazy online. There's tons of deals and stuff. So we're like, okay, maybe we can take advantage of this, Where we failed miserably is taking the right time and effort to do our research on the Chinese market. We failed miserably in our efforts to tap into China, because there's so many things from, let's say if you use Facebook, Twitter, all this stuff, all of that shit is banned in China, so you can't use them. A lot of our marketing copy too, when we were advertising on Singles Day, was in English. It's like, what are you thinking? It was like silly little mistakes, and you're like, what? We're like, this is a huge market. This is gonna be so good for the company. Yes. And it didn't work. There was a lot of time and energy and money invested into prepping for it, and like 2 weeks was just not enough to do it. And yeah, it just didn't work. So that was a big loss for us, and a good learning. So do your research before you start to do your localized marketing in a different market. Yeah.
Good advice. One more for you. How do you motivate your fully distributed team besides salary?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, so naturally, I think when you start a company, you don't really have that much money, right? So salary, when you're hiring, should not be the predetermining factor for someone to join your team. If you're coming to work for a company simply because of the paycheck, which some people do need to do, it's just not really a good fit for a company that's just starting, right? So to motivate people, if salary really is the main incentive for them to do their job, at full speed, it's usually not a really good fit for a company that is bootstrapping. So early days, what we were doing is we offered part ownership to our first employees. So they are now part owners in the company. Other things we do in terms of like weekly and day-to-day motivation is, we have one-on-ones with a lot of our team members each week. We keep it very like open door policy. So I really encourage my team. We're all very tight. It's like family to us. We're a team of 13 people, so still quite small. I encourage everyone to come to me and talk to me, if they have any issues, and I do everything I can to help them, solve those problems. And so yeah, not feeling alone, because we talk about this a lot with remote teams, is you have the tendency to feel like, oh God, I'm here by myself. I have to I'm in this role. I have to solve this problem all by myself. But it's like these one-on-ones are really great, because then people don't feel like they have to do these things by themselves. They have help. And in addition to that, another thing I think that motivates our teams also, I think people across the board here can probably agree with it, is doing the annual kind of like work retreats. We call them the hackathons, so the Mailbird hackathons, and they're 1 month long. People love it. They get psyched. They get to meet like all their team members, and at the end of it, they feel like, oh my God, I'm so comfortable with my team now. I have no problem like communicating or asking them for help. So that's really motivating, and it makes people really excited about what they're doing too. So.
I'll just add on to the how do you motivate your team. When Omar was speaking earlier, I was completely on board with hiring people that give a shit. Maybe they don't give a shit about your company yet. They don't know your company, but they give a shit about something. You can tell there's light behind the eyes, and they are hungry. And you get this through experience of hiring hundreds of people. Once you've got them on board, you've hired someone who gives a shit, your next goal is to make them give a shit about your company, right? And you do that by laying out strategic plan for what you want to do 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and then empowering them to actually make the change that will get you there. And once they buy into like getting your company there, you've got them. That's the plan.
All right, great. So random dude, I can tell you're out there hoping your question doesn't get bumped off the thing. So I'm gonna end your anxiety, and I'm gonna ask your question next. Maybe it's just me that would feel like that, but I've been watching it go, and I'm like, oh my God, is it gonna get bumped out? So bigger isn't always better. How do you determine what an ideal team size is? Which is a tough one to answer. I guess it depends on what you're doing. But how do you grow your companies without always adding new staff?
I don't know. I think I take a pretty simplistic approach to that, and a lot of people would call me simplistic in a lot of ways, maybe. But you just do it when it's necessary. And I think, you as you grow, you realize, shit, you need someone, right? You look for them, and it's as simple as that. And where do you get that person? We've always tried to grow organically. It's done. Haven't very rarely have we ever done recruitment, sort of active recruitment. It's sort of been done organically, which has its pros and cons. You may not necessarily be finding the best sort of like talent for that role, but what it does ensure is a really good culture. Because it might be friends of friends or people that know someone or someone that you've met at such and such a place. If you really want to build a strong positive culture, which I think is essential to really building any team, whether that be presential or remote. So yeah, I think you just sort of do it that way, or we have.
An ideal company for me, like in terms of bigger isn't always better. An ideal company, and I'm kind of joking when I say this, is like I wish we had 0 employees. I wish I didn't have a partner, and money just rained down on me from the sky. Like that's the kind of business I want. But you know, we see businesses all the time. We sell 6, 7-figure businesses for people, mid 6 figures and above. There are no companies, or very, very few, that are mid 6 figures and above that don't have more than just a solo entrepreneur. You have to build a team. In terms of like what we're doing to do that is we're building a team because we suck at tech, and we've got a nice pretty face because we paid a good designer, and we have a bunch of people behind the scenes just trying to make it work, and then we're backfilling it with development. So like we have a lot of people like, you know, wheels moving behind the scenes to make the machine work, and then we're going to fill in with development so that we can scale much larger with tech. That's our plan.
And just a quick comment too, in terms of growth. Yeah, I mean, we have a very small team, I think, compared to a lot of other companies that are out here. 13 people, and like you mentioned, growing organically too. Like part of it also involves having somewhat of a plan for where your company's going, obviously. So if you're expecting to get here, who do you need to hire to get there? Or maybe you don't need to hire anyone. So it's kind of having a sit down with, you know, your founders and your company, your existing team members, and kind of saying, okay, hey, team A, like, where are you guys at? Are you guys able to handle your current workload? Like, let's say if you're someone who's in customer support, and if they're like, oh my God, we are like completely like blocked up to the brim, like we need help, then it's like, okay, well, it's time for us to start thinking about this. And I'm like, okay, next time, don't wait till you get to that point, you know, let's start thinking about hiring earlier on so you guys don't get to this point where you're like completely bogged down. So I think, yeah, you just have to kind of put a plan in place when hiring. And I mean, I think it's also different when people fundraise. There's a lot of pressure from VCs when you fundraise to like, okay, now we have to grow the team like crazy, like hire. And you do go into growing pains. There's a big difference between having a team of 13 people to having a team of 50 or 100, you know? So I also personally feel that like it's good to kind of take things slowly so you don't get into these conundrums of like, oh my God, there's so many people, how do we manage them? How do we onboard them? All of this stuff. So I think just do it carefully and slowly and plan.
Do you want to tell us your fundraising story?
Ooh, okay, sure. So without sharing too many details on finances for Mailbird, when we were fundraising, there was a couple of things that we learned, because you hear so many different people's points of views in terms of like, you know, you should not be doing anything else when you're fundraising. You should put all your energy and dedicate yourself 100% to fundraising. And I was just like, this is not possible. I have a company to run, you know. I can't just like abandon that and like put everything I got into fundraising. But you know, that was one of the arguments. So you're getting people saying, this is what you need to do to make it happen. When we actually fundraised, we actually did 2 small bridge rounds. And the way some of these things happen, I think a lot, like, yeah, you know, awesome, you have a great business, you have an awesome team, you know how to sell it, that's great, and the investors, they buy into it. In our particular scenario, I was at a tech conference, so yeah, lots of networking, lots of VCs that we were talking to, and I kind of like left this conference thinking like, okay, that wasn't a win for us, you know, we didn't really sell it to any one investor. But then it was actually, so this is, I think, the benefit of some of these events. It was after the conference, there was this huge networking event, and I happened to meet someone who is an angel investor. So an individual angel investor. He was also an entrepreneur at one point in his life, which is really cool, because I'm like, that's awesome. And after kind of the networking event, we started having a follow-up conversation. And this guy just so happened to be Danish. 2 of my co-founders, they're Danish, so there's somewhat of like a Danish connection there, I guess. I don't know. And we just continued the conversation about the business, and the guy really believed in us, and he loved what we were doing, and we stayed in touch, and eventually he was like, I wanna invest in you guys. And it was like, really? Like, this is amazing. Like, this didn't require, like, you know, copious amounts of due diligence and updating our pitch deck and, like, really, you know, bending the metrics to make it look really amazing. Like, it was just, like, a simple conversation with a guy that really believed in us and saw what we were doing with our business and where we were going, and he was pumped, and we decided to, yeah, basically take his money.
That sounds
Is that all
really
the funding you've taken?
That's all the funding we've taken, yeah.
Okay.
And if, just a quick comment on it too, like, for anyone who hasn't fundraised for their company, like I fully believe that like if you can do it without fundraising, like stick to that. Like, that's awesome. Because the more people you have involved in your company, and depending on what the relationship is like with your investors, things get a little more complicated. And yeah, stress levels also increase tremendously. So if you don't like stress, don't take money from investors. So, yeah.
No, just you made it sound way too easy. Like,
I know this was surprisingly easy. I was like, yeah, it's not usually. Yeah, so that was our story.
Okay, Random Dude 2.0 has come back for another question. And I keep track of like really inane details about everything, and then I forget the really important shit in life. And so 22 upvotes. I have to say this might be the most popular question in the history of the Running Remote conference. So well done, Anonymous or Random Dude. Okay, four of us, I guess, is what we're after. 4 CEOs. Say you're given 50 grand and had to start a business tomorrow. What business would you start and why? But you can't start in your related industry. Go.
all right, so I see a lot of businesses. I got some ideas here. $50,000. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. You can buy a business from us that makes about $2,000, $2,200 a month. You can come to a place like Bali or Chiang Mai and live like a boss. So there's that. But that's the cheap way out of the answer. What I would do is, and I've seen quite a few of these in our marketplace, enough to where they're interesting. In the educational space, like the for-profit educational space, they're willing to pay a lot of money for leads, anywhere from $40 to $150 per lead that you send them. Includes name, phone number, and email address. And you can target people that are looking for educational opportunities very locally. So it makes anyone who's familiar with SEO, it makes local SEO relatively, it's much easier than like national SEO on a national scale. So targeting, let's say, medical education for-profit schools in Tulsa or in Sacramento or whatever, and getting ranked for those terms, and then collecting lead gen and selling that off to a place like Quinn Street or Campus Explorer. That's a pretty easy way to get up to $4,000 or $5,000 a month. You can do that inside of 6 months relatively easily with like a little bit of SEO chops. So that's what I would do.
That was very specific. Okay, anybody else got one?
Yeah, you go.
Oh, sure. Okay. So for me, I'm diabetic. I've been living with type 1 diabetes since I was 8 years old. And so the tech industry has been always very fascinating when it comes to diabetes. And I'm actually, I don't know if you guys can see here, I'm wearing like this weird little patch right here. People are coming up to me like, are you trying to quit smoking? Or like, are you like, is that your birth control? I'm like, no, this is a continuous glucose monitoring system. Some other people I'll tell, like, oh no, this is our latest technology for Mailbird. It's like how you receive your emails now. So it's really awesome.
No wonder you get funding.
Go to getmailbird.com, yeah. No, so, but yeah, I would love to do something in tech with regards to diabetes. It's something that I live with. It's tough. It's a full-time job to manage diabetes, let alone on top of that, like a startup, your own company, right? So that's something that's very dear to me. So looking at better ways to manage diabetes would be really interesting, including one that I stumbled upon that was really cool that was called Pimp My Diabetes, and it was like accessories for all your cool diabetes gear. Nice. So I don't know, something like that. Yeah. Something in diabetes.
It's kind of related to what I do, but it's kind of not as well. I'll stick with it's a real estate business. A lot of people are now having a lot more flexibility to live and work in different destinations or locations. And people are starting to think about, oh, okay, right, I don't actually want to have a home in one place for 1 year, all year. I like the idea of spending 6 months in Australia, in 6 months in Colombia or Bali or Spain or whatever. So the idea is to set up a timeshare home ownership business, in which case you can have 2, 3, 4 different homes around the world. You can have your things there, your photos of your family and your dog, or actually maybe your dog. You're not going to have 4 dogs around the world, I guess, but your photos there. So you arrive there, the other person has just moved out of the home, you move in, you go back into your home. There, your family photos are already set up, your little decorations, little accessories that you bought for the house are already there, and you go and you spend your 6 months in that location before you go back to your other home in the other part of the world where it is.
He can obviously make 50 grand stretch really far.
Yeah.
You should get, Omar left, you should get his mom to talk to you.
But you can actually do that, like through, So it's like basically you just skim off the top. Like you're getting a commission. So you look for people who have properties there that then are willing to have other owners within there that timeshare as well. So maybe I have a place in Spain. Right, I'm not going to be there all year, but I'm willing to set up a timeshare arrangement whereby someone else will have it for 3 months or 6 months or 2 or 3 other people there, and then I get ownership in other locations around the world as well.
All right. Since you said 4, I guess what's been on my mind a lot is I'm very interested in, I shouldn't say making people happy, although I do like making people happy, but I think helping people be less unhappy. So over the last 5 years at Hoobwood, I won't say we have a lot of unhappy people at Hoobwood, but we have a lot of people that have ended up in Bali, ended up kind of coming through our doors because they've been in lives that they no longer believed in, and so they've kind of really left something. I'm kind of curious about the millions that haven't left, and I don't think leaving is the solution for all these people in these jobs and these kind of lives that, I mean, some of the stats I had on the first day, there's a lot of people that are really unhappy with their situation where they are. And so I've been thinking a little bit on the mental health side about how do we bring kind of some of the feelings of freedoms and choice and opportunities and spaciousness that people have enjoyed here kind of to people in these cities. So I don't know if it's an educational training company, like something in that realm, but probably working with companies and local institutions in terms of helping people expand their box a little bit. I just spent some time in the UK the last few weeks, and they just appointed a minister of loneliness, which is unbelievable. I mean, so they've actually created a whole ministry for loneliness to tackle this, and this is something that's coming up. You know, a lot of reports coming out of Japan and Korea right now, and this is absolutely a global epidemic that we kind of see one little slice of. So I think that's where I'd put my 50K. Yeah, plus people will pay a lot for mental health stuff, so there you go. Okay, I guess this would be for Justin. How do you find highly skilled workers in the Philippines?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't find them. We basically developed them, right? So a lot of our team has been with us more than 4 years, several of them for nearly 10 years now. And, you know, similar to, you know, what Omar was talking about before, find people that give a shit. We found employees that gave a shit and then train them what we need them to do. And because they care and are interested, they're interested in doing that. So, you know, I really don't like when people are like, you know, they say things like find A players, go get A players, don't mess with B players. I don't think A players exist. I think A players are developed, and so that's kind of our approach, is to find people that that are interested, that are interesting, and that we can train to kind of get up to speed to work with us. So we develop some of our best team in the Philippines and everywhere else, honestly.
So look for the light in the eyes, then develop. So any success with hiring? Sources that you people have used for hiring, and which ones, do you have any kind of recommendations, good or bad, for hiring platforms or hiring techniques? How are you finding your people?
Some of our best people are hired through our own audience. So, you know, we put out, you know, the beacon saying, hey, look, we're hiring people, and we have fans apply to work for our company. And that's great for us because we have an audience, but like if you don't have an audience, it's much more difficult. I think it was We Work Remotely is the one that we're using right now that's giving us some success, looking for a UI UX person. So we've used Online Jobs at PH as well. And there's a bunch of them out there. Some are better than others. Online Jobs and We Work Remotely are the ones that are working for us now.
Yeah, and I would also say the same thing. Like, if you find someone when you put out a job vacancy for your company who's like an existing user of your software, your business, or your service, whatever it is, that's like the best person to hire because they're already like in it. You know, they love what you're doing and they want to work with you. So that's really cool, and you get the best people that way as well. In addition to that, though, we use recruiting services from a company in Bali called Live It, and they've been incredible. One of the girls is right up here in the front, Alexandrina. So no, they've been amazing. They're really skilled at hiring, whether you need dev people, and not just locally in Indonesia or anywhere in Asia, like literally anywhere in the world, they will help you hire. So we just work with really great recruiting services as well. But otherwise, sometimes you just like stumble upon them. Like the last developer I hired was at my co-working space actually in Chengdu, and it was like this. It was a speed dating kind of like networking event where you look for everyone that was there, they could like introduce themselves, what do they do, and the developer was like a C# developer, and I was like, I'm looking for a developer. I was like, what language do you code in? He's like, C#. I'm like, oh, I'm looking for a C# developer. So, I mean, yeah, sometimes you meet people when you're like networking, but yeah, those are a couple of different things that we've done. Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, we've got 14 minutes left, so get those questions coming, get those questions voting. We're running out of opportunities here, okay? With remote workers, do you set them up with a laptop, second screen, or make a minimum requirement? Like, for example, you need certain tech to work here. You have to have Apple, you have to have whatever. Anything like that for any of you?
Yeah, with when we went remote with our team, we closed on the office and felt like losers, and I talked about it yesterday. With our Philippines crew, we set them up with laptops. After that, we'd only hire people that already had laptops, so that was just a minimum requirement coming on board. With foreign staff, yeah, they have to have a laptop. Sometimes they require other equipment, cameras or microphones or whatever, and we'll buy that for them after they come on board. So we'll help them out with the equipment after the fact, but laptop's kind of a minimum.
Okay. Yeah, I just offered to pay after feeling really bad. Somebody did a presentation about how important it is to get your team co-working spaces, and I think I said that on the beginning of day one. And we have a remote member in Poland or in Portugal. So actually, I just wrote her last night in a fit of Canadian Catholic guilt and said, "Hey, I'd like to get you a co-working membership." So that's as far as we've got. We're just kind of doing the remote thing for the first time. Internal communication and project management stack. What do you guys use?
We're a little old school. We use Skype. Some of our team members use Slack as well, and we also obviously use for internal and external communications our own dog food, right? Email, which is our own software, Mailbird. And then for project management, we actually also integrated this in our software, but we use Asana. It's been wonderful. I hated it when I first started using it. It was awful. I was like, ugh. I don't get it. But I've been using it now for 6 years, and it's awesome. It's really good for collaboration and task management, project management, all of this stuff. So, yeah.
We use Slack, Trello, Zoom, email, and really just simplifying it as much as possible. Someone touched on it yesterday. Don't introduce too many tools into it. It just confuses things. You're trying to find, now did I write that message, or was it on Slack? Was it on Trello? Was it on whatever like it might be. So we just really try and simplify it with those tools.
I have a buddy that's a SaaS hole, and he loves to just go from like SaaS company to SaaS company and like try new things. And that's easy when it's like one or two or three of you. It's like really easy to do, and you just switch to a new system. It's much more difficult the more people you add. So internally we use Slack. We also use something called Monday.com for the marketing team. What's interesting though is you get stuck in these systems. Like we use Zendesk for customer support. And the cost of us leaving Zendesk with all of our SOPs, with everything laid out, is ridiculously high. Like the cost of retraining everyone and getting everyone up to speed. So, if you want to build a business in that industry where it's like a real pain in the ass to leave, you'll have your customers for life. Yeah. So, I mean, Slack, Zendesk, we use HubSpot on our sales team for our CRM. Like us leaving them would be just terrible. So, yeah, they've got us for a while.
We actually used Time Doctor for a period there. I was using it myself just on a personal level. I actually wanted to start to track and measure where I was spending my own personal time as much as possible, and I thought it was great. And then I'm not overly organised, so I didn't really actually utilise it the way you could. But I started introducing it with the team as well, But once again, as a manager, you need to be able to then use that tool for its benefit. And in the end, I realised I actually wasn't personally able to, and to really get the information from that to be able to get the results or get the benefits from it. But I think it does actually have a lot of benefits.
Cool. All right. Anonymous asks, Steve, are you also doing fundraising for Hubud? If so, how is the pitching and from which investor? Will Hubud be on any other place outside of Bali? We've never taken outside investment. We bootstrapped, we self-funded. There was 3 co-founders at the beginning. I've murdered them both now, and now it's just me. No, it's not true. But now it is just me in terms of they both kind of left the company and have gone back to different countries. So we've never taken outside investment. It's something we're considering for a couple of different initiatives. And about who would be in on any other place outside of Bali? That's a great question. I'm going to have a clear answer to that in December. But my answer is very likely. Okay, Sarah asks, do you have any initiatives to hire locals in the countries you operate who may not have equal access to online jobs?
Yeah, like in terms of hiring locals, and we're like, at least for Mailbird, like we're a fully distributed team. So because we are somewhat in the tech field, to find people that don't have access to online jobs, I think would be a little challenging, because that's like how we do the hiring process. It's all of it's online pretty much. And also, yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, I think, because yeah, you have to have access to online anymore nowadays to apply for jobs, to find job vacancies, depending on what industry you're in too. So
yeah, it's a filter for us. If you don't know, we hire like online dorks, right? We're online dorks. We're online dorks. That's what we do. And if you're not able to find the jobs online, then you just can't join us. And you know, another example, you know, we help people sell and buy online businesses. And my mom, who is like, it took her 45 minutes to get on Skype. You know, she was like, well, maybe I'd love to buy an online business, and I can do this in, you know, as I retire, and I'll run this business. And I just told her, no, like, Mom, I love you. You just don't have the skills to get there.
Because
and
you knew
like,
she'd be calling you up every weekend going, Justin.
Yeah, that too. I was like, you just don't have the skills to do that. And like, I mean, we just don't have any initiatives to train people to get them up to the basic level with online nerdery to do what they need to do.
Yeah, I would encourage, like, I mean, you as company owners and people that are recruiting, one of the things that really excited me about a year into running Whowood and kind of seeing what was happening and fully understanding the power of the digital world, I suppose, in terms of democratizing income. The designer we hired first at Whowood, who is, I mean, she was just an amazing designer, Indonesian, you know, and she was very focused and said, I'm going to work for you because I want to get out of my current job. I'd like to meet people. Basically, she very blatantly said, I'd like to use you for all of the experience I'm going to get. I'm going to work for you for 6 months, and then I'm going to go freelance. And we hired her, and 6 months later, she went freelance. And she made around $3,000 US a month, which in Bali is, well, actually, I shouldn't say in Bali, lots of places in the world, that's a great salary, right? And so, but she could do that because she went through the online platforms. And I mean, I think it's like less about, I think if you're concerned about this, then you should really kind of factor that into your own decision making as recruiters, and making sure there's not kind of implicit biases and stuff like that in terms of selecting different people from which country they come from. And I think so many people now have access to the ability to access the online world that in some ways it's made economic opportunities so much more available than they were even 5 years ago. In Bali, if you wanted to make you know, decent money, you'd go on the cruise ships or things like that. They export a lot of their people, or in the Philippines. I mean, you know, it's all remittances because people are going outside for jobs. And you guys have the opportunity to kind of flip that around by hiring talented people from these places. Okay, people have been hailing the death of email for years. We've seen a fair share of email bashing this weekend. How do you sell email tech to investors?
Woo, good question. All right. So I firmly believe that email is probably one of the best damn inventions ever since the age of the internet, in terms of communication, in terms of efficiency and speed. I know there's a lot of different companies that have surfaced, especially in Silicon Valley, that are, yeah, basically dogging on email. Because, yeah, we all hate it. It's frustrating. It's like you get too much of it. It's annoying. When I'm on vacation, I don't want to get emails. So one of the things that we really focus on when we talk about email to people is, number one, email management. My first job right out of college, I was working at a market research firm, and we were using Outlook. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And I was like, you know, you never really get training on how to manage this influx of information just flooding your inbox when you get into work. You don't end up doing any work. So yeah, you just end up dealing with emails all day. So one of the things that we do in a lot of our content is educating people on how to properly manage email inboxes and how to reduce the amount of email that comes into your inbox. On top of that, email has changed quite dramatically. So today it's still the #1 activity everyone here and around the world are using to communicate, both internally, maybe internally it's changing a little bit more, but especially externally. If you're selling to consumers or businesses, email is the tool, right? So with that, on top of email, there's so many other communication tools that have surfaced between chat, between project management, and honestly, a lot of these things are used in simultaneously alongside email. A lot of these things are actually also built on top of email. So for example, if you get a notification, let's say in any of these chat apps or whatever, or in your task management application, guess where you find out about it if you don't log into that app? In your inbox, in your email. So all of these things play really, really well together, and I think it's just an easy target for people to say, email's the worst, but like we forget, like email is probably one of the best inventions that we've ever came across. So now what we do with email is really that unification of all those different channels between multiple inboxes from different providers to your chat apps, to your messenger apps, to your task management apps. We create one unified place for all of it. So
I think there's a bias here too. I mean, we were already bashing
yeah.
Slack. Like yesterday, people were like, "Oh, Slack! I'm getting blown away by Slack." Right? I mean, I think a lot of people here are kind of bleeding edge, using early stuff. The vast majority of people are still in their inbox. I don't know why I'm defending your email.
Thanks,
service,
man.
Yeah.
Because you're going to invest. We know it.
We
Andrea,
used to.
people have been hailing the death of email for years. I
same
think
one,
that's
yeah.
an important thing because you're right. They've been hailing it for years, and yet it still is here. Word of mouth recommendation, does it still work? Like somebody recommending a staff, a vendor, or a client, and have you had that experience?
I think it's always going to be, the number one marketing tool. I would have thought, though, a personal recommendation from anyone about your business, whether it is you should go and work for these people, whether or not you should go and use these services. We trust that, we believe in it. It's come from someone reliable, so I don't think that's ever going to be replaced, no matter how much money you're spending on your marketing communication channels. Word of mouth is always going to be the best.
We do an okay job of trying to get either testimonials or client referrals. So, after we've done business together, we'll send you a swag bag, which is a bunch of stuff, and then we'll follow up with you ask you about your experience with us, and then follow up for either a testimonial or a referral, and we try to do that with all our clients. And it does, generate quite a bit of business or testimonials or goodwill with our clients long term.
How co-working space become profitable? Renting cost is expensive. Do you also manage other programs in your co-working space? Okay, so I'll answer that one. Depending on kind of how big you're going to think about this, if you want to make a ton of money, the co-working industry is a challenging business, full stop. You make money by renting it out for less money than you pay for it on the real estate side. I know that sounds really simple, but that's it. You're renting it for a fixed cost and carving it up and allocating it more efficiently. So I would say people scale their co-working businesses in one of two ways. They scale it horizontally, so they get a bigger space or more spaces, more floors, and then that drives down the kind of percentage of costs for stuff like the operating costs around staff, especially, and things like that, or opening multiple spaces. Or they look at it vertically, and that's certainly where we focused, which is how do we add more services on top, more elements on top, that kind of add to the revenue pool. We run Asia's biggest co-working conference. It's called CU Asia. It happens every year. It's going into its 5th year, so it's kind of become a thing now. This year it'll be in Goa in India, so if you're interested in co-working, check it out. But through that, I have learned that yes, this is a difficult industry unless what you're doing is really kind of a disguised real estate play. What are the differences between working as a hired CEO and a CEO as a founder? Is anybody here a hired CEO?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know really what the differences would be. More than so when I met my co-founders, I kind of joined them. We didn't really have any roles in mind in place of who's going to do what. We were just kind of like, okay, here's our idea. What are we going to do with it? And the first thing that I ran into was just like, okay, here's this software, and at the time it was terrible. It was like, oh God, what am I gonna do with this? How do I sell this? So at that time, I was really like kind of almost helping them more with marketing, and then eventually I started taking on more roles as I joined them because the ideas came from my co-founders. And I started helping them more with business development. I started doing the initial hiring for the company myself. I set up everything, right, for the company, all the social accounts for it and everything. So over time, the more I would have these sit-downs with my two co-founders, we started talking more strategic. What were the next steps for the business strategically? And over time, we're like, okay, I guess it's time now for us to kind of decide on roles. Like, what are we each going to be doing? And so, in that sense, I was technically hired as a CEO for the company. I kind of fell into that role when I joined them. So yeah, the difference though, I would think that like if you are the sole like creator or founder or person that came up with this idea for the business, somehow I think you do have a little more of a stronger feeling of ownership because it is your true idea. This came from you. So maybe that's a little bit of the difference, because as a hired CEO, you're just as dedicated, you're excited about the project and the business, but because it wasn't your own, it's kind of like I think there's a little bit of a difference there.
I wonder if you can look at things a little more objectively in the business than someone like I can, where like we just, bled for this business. Like we were starting off like in the trenches, and I wonder if you can look at things a little more objectively as a hired CEO. That's an interesting point.
So thank you to all of the participants in the panel, and thank you all for your questions.